90%, depending on who's counting and how you count, 89 to 90% of all banks are capitalized at $1 billion and under. $1 billion and under. And as you are aware, when our friends representing banks come before the committee, they talk about community banks and the need to help community banks. But they also, when they do this, in talking about community banks, they are always small banks, usually under 10 billion, most of the time under 3 billion, thereabout. So they talk about community banks, they're small banks. But each time I, personal pronoun, each time I have suggested that we'd be willing to help 90% of all banks, that would be those under $1 billion, by extricating them from most rules and regulations, and been willing to go higher than that. The ranking member had a great piece of legislation on it. They always want to go to the $50 billion level. They contend that a community bank is a $50 billion bank. They want to get to the $50 billion trigger that places systemically important institutions, designates these institutions as significantly important, systemically important, excuse me. So we've tried to help the small banks, but the small banks are linked to the very large banks, not the mega banks, but the very large banks. And for whatever reasons, they cannot sign off on legislation that would help them, the small banks. That's why they use this term, a lot of nebulosity in this, and esoterica to some extent. They use these terms that they interchange when it's convenient. When it's convenient, they want to be small, and when it is not, they are otherwise.
Time of the gentleman has expired. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Utah seek recognition?
Strike the last word.
Gentlelady's recognized for 5 minutes.
I'd like to yield my